Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Caroline, nice to meet you in person, or I mean, on
Yeah,
Zoom,
these days I think that's the same thing.
practically.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's wonderful to meet you back.
yeah. I love your podcast. You have an amazing voice. And
Thank you.
I just wanted to tell you that your framework for this course that you're teaching, it's brilliant. I love it. Like,
Oh, good.
I have felt all of those things. I was like, she's a wise woman.
Thank you. That's really important to me because that's what I see in all my students. You probably feel the same thing is
Mhm.
really there are a lot of technical questions and where do I start? But what's holding them back isn't the inability, it's the fear that if they try it, they either won't understand how to do it
Mhm.
or they'll just suck at it.
Yep. Hmm.
Or nobody, or some of them are afraid that they're going to be seen and what people will think. And I think that's worse than their fear that they'll stay anonymous.
Mm. Yes, totally. I also, this one, I've never heard anybody articulate this before, but you totally nailed it. And I have personally felt it myself as a painter when you said, like, you can do the same thing twice. Like,
Yeah.
because so many times you have one beautiful moment on your painting and you're like, oh, now I can't, like, now I'm not going to do anything more on this because I don't want to mess it up. And that's what gets you into freeze, right? You can't
Oh,
do
oh yeah.
anything.
And the worst thing about it, I call it painting paralysis, but is if it happens in the middle of the painting and now you're
Mhm.
like, oh crap, I can't finish it.
Mhm. Totally.
So yeah,
What
there's a
is
lot of mindset there.
So yeah, well, it's critical. I mean, I think that's kind of what's important, honestly. Didn't Picasso not I don't like to hold Picasso up as the be all end all, but there's many more wonderful people to quote, but he said if there's one part of the painting you love, then get rid of it.
Wow. That's really scary.
It
Yeah.
is scary, right?
I think it's that kind of thing like holding on to the edge of the pool because
Hmm.
when I was teaching Saturday and
Hmm.
one of my students, she's very experienced in drawing, but she's not experienced in painting. She's done it, but she's not experienced enough to feel like the confidence is there like she does with her drawings. And we worked out we were going direct to oil sketch on the painting instead of doing a painting drawing transfer, something like that, transfer to the painting surface. And she said, well, I was giving the demonstration, I took it to the next level, I was doing the blocking, and she goes, wait, you want us to paint over the drawing? We just got the drawing right. And I said, this is the scary part. You know,
Yeah.
I used to scuba dive.
Uh-huh.
And I remember the first day of class, the instructor took my gear and he threw it in the deep end of the pool and he said, go put your gear on. And I went, and that was like, okay. And he's like, this pool has no sides. We're not gonna see or use the sides of the pool. And that was my first lesson was
Wow.
put your gear on underwater. And I thought, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. So
Yeah.
that's how I
Wow.
teach.
That's intense. Wow.
So wow,
Amazing.
I love your work. I'm so in love with your work. It's
Thank you.
amazing. And you, I know, like to take people to that next level
Mhm.
of seeing. It's
Mhm.
a very cerebral but very esoteric thing where you're just seeing on kind of a different plane and the meanings behind what you're seeing. There's so many layers to what you do. And that's
Thanks.
not even touching the fact that you decode taxes for artists. So like you are just completely you're just a complete superhero to me.
Thanks. I
It's
appreciate that.
true. I'm like,
I
my head
didn't
just
do it
went.
all in 6 months.
That's what we're going to take apart right now. I want you to start us off with how did you develop both your art and your tax business?
Hmm. Sure. Just jump in. Um,
Give me what you got.
well, so I mean, art came first, no question. I have always identified as an artist since I could hold a crayon. Um, and it just felt it very strongly, as many artists do. Though the world told me for sure that that wasn't a smart move for my career, like that it wasn't a good, steady enterprise, right? So I definitely had a strong meta message of like, you're not going to make any money. you're going to, die in poverty. This is going to be like a struggle. So that voice was strongly on my shoulder. So let's see, I actually got my MFA in 2005. So I've been an actual professional since then. Not that I have any feeling that people need to get an MFA. If I'm honest, I actually, and I will say this to encourage those of you who have not gotten an MFA, the artists I see with the most confidence don't have MFAs. There's actually statistical evidence to back that up. Like if you look at Carol Michaels' book, How to Survive and Thrive in the Art World, she actually proves it with data. But I think that is because, school often is trying to break you down a little bit. It actually makes you more insecure. So, and that I found that to be true.
That's the second time I've heard that in 2 days. That really scares me.
Oh, that's funny. No, yeah. It's really true. It is really true. But yeah, so I was an artist first, and the tax part just came because I had this like total, oh my God, what do I do? Just like hit in the face with a shovel feeling when I got out of school and was a professional. And I was like, wait, how am I supposed to handle the taxes? I don't even know what counts as income. Like,
right.
And then I have all these different, a commission here, a little like random teaching gig here, gallery sales here, a grant occasionally. Like, how do these threads fit together? And then where do expenses go in all of that? How am I supposed to work that out?
What qualifies as expenses?
Absolutely. So it was so confusing that first of all, I just read a book. I read a book about freelance taxes. Then I got my taxes done by my dad's accountant, which was a risk for me because it cost, to me at that time, that was a lot of money. And he was a horrifying jerk. It was the worst experience of my life. He was so belittling.
That was my question. Was he condescending? And
he was condescending.
Stupid, flighty artist.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Just all the stereotypes. He had no curiosity about me whatsoever. He didn't think like, oh, maybe I should ask. Maybe I should see if she is flighty or stupid. I'll just treat her like she is.
Yeah, obviously you have no brains.
Oh, man. It was humiliating and a painful experience. So that was a crystallizing moment because I was like, there has got to be something better. Like it was so bad. So, yeah. Just, for all the professional creative people out there, I was like, this cannot be my only option. So
I'm so glad you felt that way though, because it benefits us. I mean, everybody feels that way as artists. I think I'm going to make a generalization to my audience now and say, all y'all, including me, have felt that of why do I have to learn business?
Totally. Yeah. Oh, well, me too. I mean, I kind of, when I was young and starting out, you really could not have convinced me to take an economics class, a business class. I stayed as far away from that as I possibly could, in part because business felt inauthentic to me. I was really interested in authenticity, which is, of course, why I think I always felt that I was an artist. Like, I love to draw, and that's a huge part of being an artist, but I also just wanted to be myself. And it didn't feel like you were allowed to be yourself if you were in business. You were supposed to be selling stuff and like
look a certain way.
Yeah. It just,
the clothes and the everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You were supposed to present yourself in a certain way. And like, I know you do a lot of portrait work, and I even in portraits don't want to flatter the subject, which doesn't make me the world's greatest portrait painter.
I love it.
Nobody wants me to do their portrait.
Well, they hate it when you say don't wear any makeup. I had this one woman and she came and she was just, I thought I can't see a single undertone, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have to just do my best and let this one go. I like total coverage. And I thought, people naturally want to be their best face forward, but it doesn't help the portrait artist.
So interesting. I have never even thought about that with the makeup, but of course you don't see the blood under their skin.
Need that undertone. I'm like, do not wear the makeup. And they're like, wait, what?
That's funny. Yeah. And I can see how that's horrifying to some people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. When they're trying to literally put their best face on.
And I like all the wrinkle, everything, you know, I don't get super hyper realistic, but my husband actually got upset. I revisited an old portrait. He's like, just make a new one. But I'm like, but it's not right. You know, anatomically, there was like a thing. But when I went back in, I had to rematch all the skin tone and I ended up aging myself.
Oh,
Because
how funny.
I was so fascinated with this architecture that I started when I was like 21. And then I painted the whole thing on top of it at, you know, basically 50. And I'm like, that's what I see. And my mom's like, you aged it. And I'm like, that's reality.
Wow. It's like the portrait of Dorian Gray. That's amazing.
And you know, hey, if it keeps me younger, I'm going to make the sacrifice on canvas. Right. But I like it better. It's authentic.
Yeah.
And it shows all the struggle and it's a little painful, but I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It ain't pretty.
Yeah. I like the idea of reflecting what's really there. I mean, to me, that's kind of a core issue in art. What is really there? Not what's in your head, not what is a generic tree that you can think of, but what is that tree, that specific peach tree behind you, spring blossoms, like that one, you know, get specific. That's like the lesson of art, the lesson of learning to see.
Yes. So you're very prolific. So tell our audience how you manage a career in taxes and a career in art, because you're very successful in both realms.
Thank you. I don't do it all at one time. That is really important to know. I have seasons.
I love that.
First of all, I was attracted to taxes in part because it's seasonal. So my whole idea was like, of course, you know, your ideas and what you think is going to happen, and then what actually happens, different things. But what my idea was great. I'll do the seasonal work. I'll have a seasonal business. I'll shut the door April 15th and I'll go to my studio. So I'll have like spring, summer studio time, then ramp back up the tax practice. And that is how I did it for the first couple of years. I will tell you that when COVID hit and they extended the tax deadlines and they passed 3 new gigantic like stimulus packages that I had to learn and digest and turn around to all my people very quickly. It absolutely blew my studio out of the world.
Yes. So did launching my course for 2.5 years. I was like, this is my life.
It's tough. It's tough. It's really easy to underestimate your projects. You just don't know what problems you're going to run into. You can't. So, yeah, that happened. So
wow.
I've not been prolific in the painting side. I made one painting in 2020, if I'm being honest. I kept one. It's quite a large and ambitious painting, but I kept it in my laundry room. I have a studio outside my house, but my studio shut down for a year. So I kept a painting in my laundry room, and when I had client phone calls where I didn't have to be at my computer, I would go into the laundry room and like do a little bit on it.
Yes.
I tend to do pattern. Like I do a lot of patterns in my work.
I noticed that.
And patterns are great because your mind can stop. Like, so I will sit on a tax phone call with a client and I'll paint the pattern.
Yeah. And people think you're not listening if they don't know you, but certain things I will put on the headphones and go to my easel because it's like complete clarity. You can be somewhere else and be on that call and be in your happy place.
Well, they call it monkey mind. It's like all those sort of like repetitive tasks, they actually quiet your brain so you can focus. And so actually, as a person who struggled with ADD, it actually helps me focus. So you know, it's not like, I feel bad for all the artsy kids in school who get yelled at for doodling by their teachers, but you know, like the data shows that doodling helps you focus. So
I doodled through high school. And then the funny thing is I was always drawing portraits of the people around me, and they would know, they were used to me. So they would sit very still. And so we were all, you know, the teacher probably thought he had all these model students, but then there's one in the middle that's going like this. And so then I got to illustration school at one point, was a comic book school, right? And Jose Delbo, this is the guy that penned Wonder Woman. I mean, like he was just my idol. Wow. And he's teaching, right? And I'm drawing his portrait and I'm doodling and he thinks I'm taking notes. And at the end, he goes over my shoulder. He goes, Catalina, how long it take you to do this? He's like Brazilian. He's like amazing. But I remember that I still have that drawing. I think I gave him the original, but it was so funny because I had to doodle. I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
So in my house, you do not get in trouble. My kids come home with drawings and my husband's like, what's all that? And I'm like, Dad, good job. You need another notebook? I'll buy you another notebook. Yeah. Always with the notebook.
That's awesome.
So I love that you said that because it's really true as far as different ways the brain engages, different ways to focus. There's no one way to do it. There's no one way to learn it, absorb it. I love how you say that you help people see beauty in the weeds. And I would love you to talk about the connection between your art and mindfulness.
Oh, such a good question. I'm glad you picked up on that. I think that's one of the meta projects of my work altogether. For me, it might be my personal project, but I think it's about mindfulness for other people too. I guess I've always, like, a larger theme in all of my work is I always am interested in what's just right there in front of you today. Not when you're on some incredible Himalayan mountaintop, not when you're on a tropical vacation, like not the special moments, not the things, like no one needs me to tell them a sunset is beautiful, right? So to me, I want to point out the beauty and the stuff, the beauty and the things that people don't look at, just like see so often that they've stopped seeing it. Which, in a way is what artists do, right? Like we see things other people don't see.
We open eyes.
Yeah. And so weeds, I love because, again, like there are many like people who paint flowers and it's a whole genre and respect. But to me, I'm more interested in the ones that nobody's looking at. So, the way that the Weeds project came about was actually because I lived in New York City for about 8 years, and my paintings there, because they're always just taken from like just snapshots of my daily life. So in New York, I'm on foot all the time. And so what I painted was a lot of sidewalks and like grates, like subway grates and things.
I love
like
the
that.
Grates and the manhole covers.
Beautiful patterns in them, and the textures are so incredible.
Yeah.
Like I love painting grime. I really do.
Well, I was watching, I'm a fan of the show Castle, and of course it's off the air now, but it's goofy, it's kind of hokey, but I like it. I always like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we watch it, we're watching it on like Netflix, Hulu now. And the funniest thing about this is that every time they show the skyline, when they start an episode, it's pristine. And for some reason, and I don't like that about the show makes the skyline look like this is the cleanest, sparkliest city. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with the feel of living in New York. It's the smell, it's the sounds, and it's the grime too. There's always that human presence of an area having been used and lived in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And you capture that.
Thanks.
But you raise it up to another level.
So something kind of funny about living in New York is that for the 8 years I lived there, I never bought a green tube of paint.
Well, you didn't need one, right?
That just literally I'm just painting what was around me and I just didn't need it. There wasn't a lot of green. I mean, I could have painted, in Prospect Park, but I was painting the regular stuff. And, then my family we moved to Asheville, North Carolina, which is
I love Asheville.
I'm speaking to you now. It's such a nice town. So we moved here, and the very first thing I did, like that hit me instantly. It is like Appalachian spring here. It's beautiful. It's the mountains, and there's just green everywhere. And it really hit me after being in New York. So like the first move I made when I came here was like, went to Cheap Joe's art supply and bought 8 different shades of green. So the weeds kind of came from that, because part of what really struck me, I actually didn't really change my subject matter at all. I'm still painting sidewalks and grates and like stuff you walk by every day, like the backs of industrial buildings. But what strikes me here is all these weeds creeping into it. Like
that's the cool thing.
Over. Yeah.
Because they're hardy and they're persistent, just like artists. And the thing that blows my mind about your series about weeds really is the underlying question of who gets to designate this thing as a weed and the value, and decide, is it commercially valuable as a flower or is it a weed?
Totally. Well, and it's funny because there is no fixed definition. If you try to tell what a weed is just something on the wrong side of the border. Like it's that something can be a weed over here, but not a weed over here.
That's not political. Wow.
Well, there's many metaphors in weeds, and trust me, I'm interested. Like I had a show called Wrong Side of the Border.
Wow.
And I mean, I love weeds as a metaphor. They're also a great, I have a painting called Tough Girl, and which is like this weed that's growing on a vertical surface in a crack.
Yeah, I love that.
It's just incredible to see something like that. Look at this little thing like this. It's a concrete wall with a crack in it, and this is something trying to grow in there. It's so hopeful to me, like I think you can look at it and think it's ugly, but it's so hopeful to me. That's life trying to make it.
Well, and you have a mandala and of leaves in your weed paintings. And I love that because it's a whole, then you're doing another layer of the spirituality thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's fun to make those like a little bit more overt references to the mindfulness quality.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's in there for sure.
Now, there's a lot of mindset in the way that we're talking about approaching the value of subjects, and also where you choose to plant your flag. I think, you have to, at some point, I think, to be, maybe I'm wrong, but commercially successful, I think artists need to become okay with kind of picking a lane, even if it's just for one show or just for a certain gallery. Is there a way that you think of approaching this that can help artists to start thinking successfully and that they actually can make it?
That's a great question and complex. I think first and foremost, I think it's really important to just acknowledge and then slay the artist stereotype. It's there not at your service. It is there to hold you down in the bad way. I don't mean that in the positive way. That we're flighty, that we're bad with numbers, bad with business, that we're sort of disorganized. Like the fact is there's not a lot of room for people in the art world who actually are that thing. So don't fulfill the artist stereotype. It's not going to help you. And the fact is, like, as a person who's been a professional artist for almost 20 years now, I just haven't seen it be true. The artists who are doing well show up on time. They're very professional. They have their stuff together. They go out and get the skills that they need. If if you have a knowledge gap, you go out and learn the thing, or you can hire somebody who knows the thing. You don't have to become a tax expert. You can hire a tax expert to do your taxes or to teach you about taxes. And that one sounds self-serving. Let's use another one. Like, you don't have to photograph your own artwork. You can hire a fantastic artwork photographer, or so you don't have to DIY it all, is what I'm saying. But if you've got the skills, of course, go for it. So I think that's the first, is like just to recognize how capable you actually are, and embrace that. Like, do not let that stereotype become a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's I think probably the very biggest one.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
I was talking yesterday to Kimberly Brooks, and we were talking about this idea that ties into that, which has to do with, like, basically when you're presenting yourself to a gallery, it's not helpful to show up looking to them to validate you as an artist, to say when. Get the word when out of your vocabulary. When I get a gallery, I'll be a professional artist. Because in order for them to invest in you, and they need encouragement to see the value in you as an investment, you need to bring that mantle and put it on of, I am an artist, and be that person in your head when you present yourself to them, so that they feel they're making a wise investment.
That's such a beautiful mental framework. And I have felt it myself. I've felt it to be true. Yeah. I can feel the energy shift. If you go up with a smell of desperation or insecurity and try and have a conversation, just don't. If you're in that headspace, don't even step in the door. Like, go do what you need to do to feel great, whether that's go for a long run or like go look at your resume and remind yourself what a badass you are. Like whatever it is you need to do that thing. Call your mom. Have your best friend who pumps you up, like tell you how great you are, then go into the gallery. Because you're completely right. Even the gallery, like I think artists make a mistake of thinking that their work speaks for itself. Your work is wonderful, yes, but your work needs a frame and you are the frame. You can tell people what to think about your work, because if you don't, then they're going to pick it up from other stuff, like the fact that you seem really insecure. And they're like, oh, I guess it's not good. Like you're telling them that when you say like, I guess, if you talk like that, you're saying this isn't really good. So I think it's important to like look at that meta message and how you present yourself, and tell people how to look at your work.
I love that. I love that, because the establishment is, and again, Kimberly just said this too. She goes, the ivory tower doesn't want to think that you have other skills, because, we were talking about the concept of a gallery wanting to think that you're up in a bell tower somewhere, and just like, painting with anguish and cutting off your ear and all this difficulty and pain. And I love that you just basically said, A, you're a badass. B, you tell them what to think of you, because that's the whole thing. That's just,
if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it, or your like bad attitude is going to do it. You want to be actively filling in that gap. You don't want things by mistake to tell them. Yeah.
Yes. Woo!
Yeah.
So how did you get established in galleries yourself, especially internationally? I mean, that's just something that's like the holy grail of, you can then say, I'm a worldwide art success.
Yeah. Well, I think the first gallery I got, which was not international, was the trick. Like if you get your first gallery, then the second one's not as hard. So that was, in a way I got lucky. The gallery that first represented me in Boston came to my MFA thesis show, and they liked my work. Like they came and talked to me, and they invited me to be in a group show at that. And I knew what that meant. I knew like, they're interested. You got to show up. You got to give your absolute A game here. And like they're looking to see if you're good to work with. And like, not just if your work is good, but is it going to sell? And are you good to work with? Are you going to deliver what you say you do on time? And I was like, I knew that. And I did that. And so then ultimately they did give me a solo show and I got represented. So I think that was the hard one.
How did they end up?
Gallery was just because I taught painting in Italy. I taught painting at Boston University for a time, and they had a program in Venice, and they were struggling to find professors who would go there. Not because, of course, who doesn't want to go to Venice for 2 weeks?
Such a hardship.
Yeah. But it's a little hard to like put your whole life, tie up all your things in your life. And so they did have trouble filling it. And I was like, I'll go. So I taught in Venice, and basically getting an international gallery was really from proximity. It was because I was over there. I think getting it from Boston would have been tricky. I needed to be there. So you get a chance to have a residency abroad, go pound the pavement, like tack on some extra time to that trip and like have some meetings, show them, invite them to your studio. That's important.
I could see the value in that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So turning back to the subject of taxes, what would you say, because we're anticipating success in selling pieces and having, money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most important thing artists need to know about paying taxes?
Well, I think one of the really important things to know is it's very important to track your numbers, track your income, and track your expenses. Because actually, it is your legal obligation to report all of your income. Like when I say it's your legal obligation, like it's a felony if you don't. So it's like they really mean it.
They're all right now. All my listeners are going, oh my God.
I know. So it's your legal obligation to track all your income. So you have to be doing that. The IRS is not sympathetic if you do not. If you miss a chunk, then they'll be like, hey, we have some serious consequences for you. But the cool thing, and I like to do a little thought reversal on this, I think a lot of us get into this mindset of like, oh God, bookkeeping, yuck. Like, I don't want to set that up. What a pain. I don't want to track that stuff. Here's the thing. You don't have to. Like, if you want to go ahead and overpay your taxes, you are completely free to. There's no problem. If you don't want to bother keeping receipts and like tracking your expenses, the IRS is so completely happy to take more of your money than you actually owe. It's fine. So
That's good motivation.
I want to tell you, bookkeeping is self-care. Bookkeeping is something you do for yourself. So you pay taxes just on your profit and not on gross income, which legally you have to report all of. So you are a small business when you're an artist. It's good to know that. It's actually very important to know that being a small business, there's only one thing that defines you as that, and that is the fact that you have a profit motive. And just to get into that as a sidebar, that is a really big deal. And it's really easy in the art world to almost talk yourself out of the fact that you have one. Because, we live in a culture as artists where we're not really supposed to talk about that super overtly. You would never walk into a gallery and be like, I want to sell my paintings for maximum dollar. Tell me what's the most popular color. That's what I'm going to make all my paintings. Like we don't talk that way. And you're not in it for that, right? You want to make work that speaks to the soul and has a higher purpose, but it's okay to want to make sales, and you should. And the thing is that the IRS, the only thing they care about, the only thing that makes you a business and not a hobby is the fact that you're trying to make money. So it's really important to know, okay, you don't have to talk about it in this sort of crass way in the gallery world or among your artist friends. But when you're looking at your books, when you're doing your taxes, when you're approaching the IRS or your state taxing authority, you have to make sure you do have a profit motive. Like, you're only a business if you're trying to make money. So it's okay. It's okay. Like, let's get into the headspace where that's fine. It's okay to make money.
It is. And that, I think, ties right into the permission that you give yourself to want to get out of the starving artist mode. You have to cross that threshold of permission in your own mind first.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, and that's a good question, in that I've been keeping my taxes and my records, keeping records of my expenses for years. And what I find, because I've not completely transitioned into full-time just for my fine art, I'm still doing some marketing work on the side and some commercial stuff. But what I find is that from year to year, my expenses seem large to me, but they don't always meet the threshold of writing off the deductions. And my accountant will sometimes say, well, I'll just take the standard deductions.
Oh, can I stop you?
Yeah, please do. Because I'm wondering, like, should I just keep the receipts in case I get audited, but not deal with them unless I do? Because he's always taken the standard. Why do I even have to do the paperwork?
I want to stop you right here because this is a really common misconception. You are not alone. The standard deduction has nothing to do with your business, nothing to do.
Okay.
So do not throw away those receipts. They're not related. So the standard deduction means you don't itemize. So you don't itemize, and that's fine. Itemizing is mortgage interest, charitable contributions, medical expenses, and state and local taxes. Notice I never said anything about your art deductions in there. That's not what itemized deductions are. So you don't itemize, great. You don't have mortgage interest, state and local tax, medical expenses, and charitable contributions that are higher than the standard deduction. So fine. But that has nothing to do with your Schedule C business expenses, which you are completely entitled to under any circumstance, so long as you have a profit motive. And that is the only factor. Do you have a profit motive? If you do, keep the receipts, you get the expenses.
Okay. So I think what confused me then was that he must have been referring to my taxes as a filing jointly as a married person, because I file with my husband, but then I also file a Schedule C for myself. So maybe he was referring to that with regard to standard deductions and the business with regard to the Schedule C, because I do give him itemized everything.
Uh-huh. I want to steer you away from using that word itemized because they're not
Okay.
itemized deductions. Just call them business deductions.
Okay.
I only
Business
say this for the
business
clarity
deductions.
of your audience
No, and I
because
need to know what the difference there is.
yeah. So again, itemized deductions, charitable contributions, mortgage interest, state and local taxes, medical expenses. That's itemizing. Your business deductions are over here, unrelated, and they're
Right.
completely yours, whether you itemize or not, right? So you
Okay.
cannot itemize, but still take your business deductions.
Okay.
That's the key.
Thank you. That's good.
Yeah. And even to make it more clear, itemized deductions go into Schedule A,
Okay.
business deductions, Schedule C, two separate schedules, no relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't have a Schedule A. Fine. You still get your Schedule C.
So it's still worth it for me to keep all those lists, all those records and receipts.
For sure. For sure.
Okay.
Now, something that does come up with artists, and this could be something your accountant has talked about with you, possibly. This will, many of your listeners will, when I say this, they'll be like, oh, yeah. We've talked about that. It's the issue of losses in your business. This is an unfortunate symptom of, an art world where artists are not always paid, even when they're doing professional work, or not paid enough. Or consistently enough. And so we often have losses even when we are professionals with a profit motive. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of assuming that means they don't really have a business, or it's not a real business. And that's not true. You can even look for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go look at the title of the Schedule C. The title says profit or loss from business activities. It does not say profit only. And a loss is truly, truly valid, truly okay to take in your practice. But what happens, and a loss is actually a tax benefit to you, it shelters other income on your tax return. And the purpose of that, just because, we don't even get a civic education in taxes in this country, which is bananas.
Yeah.
Because it's a mandatory civic duty. But
my listeners have heard me rant.
So have mine. But the role of a loss, and the reason that it's allowed and the reason that it's a benefit, is because you are a genuine business, and businesses have hard years, and you're not meant, and the government is literally giving you a tax benefit for hard years. So hard years can include, and almost universally always include, the startup year. So we expect you to have a loss year one. Like, a lot of artists are like, feel a lot of guilt or shame that they don't make money at first. Neither does Uber. Neither did that restaurant you ate dinner at last night. Like, that's normal. You're not a bad guy. That's completely normal. If you even think about the framework here, a business cannot make money from its own operations until it exists, right? Doesn't that sound obvious?
Yeah.
We don't think of it that way. Like, a pizza parlor can't make money from selling pizzas until it has an oven, until it has flour, right? And how does it get an oven? How does it get flour? It can't get that yet from selling pizzas. It needs that money coming from somewhere else. And that's going to be a loss for a while. So there's this whole thing in business. This is one of the sort of miracles of actually going back to school and studying business and economics and accounting that I'm so thrilled to bring to artists. But like, there's this whole concept in business of the break-even point. In other words, it's a completely accepted principle of operating any business, and you are included in this, all of you artists listening, that you're going to be running at a loss for a while, as you get started. And then you hit this magical moment called the break-even point. That's where your expenses and your income equal zero, right? You're in the negative until that. And then we're like, woohoo, now we start going positive. And that's the fun part. Like, amen, let's all get there. But
Amen.
That's important to know.
So now, is this true that if you don't show a profit 3 years running, if you're showing losses, that you get downgraded to a hobby level?
Okay, so here's where all of your accountants are wrong and I'm right. I'm going to really put my flag in the ground right now.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I can say this because I read the case law for artists and your accountant doesn't. Sorry, I'm being a snob right here. But here's the thing. So there's a guideline called the hobby loss rule that Basically, the thing about having a loss in your business, some people have abused the fact that a loss creates a tax shelter, right? So there are people in the world right now filing tax returns with Schedule Cs with losses on them so that they pay less income tax than they should rightfully be paying. And they'll put things on there like their horse farm, which they're doing because they love horses and they have a lot of money and they just, and they're going to pretend it's a business, or their charter fishing boat, and they're going to call it a business, occasionally take someone out, right? So these things that people do for fun, they put on Schedule Cs and fake it and have a loss and get a tax shelter, right? And there are people maybe doing art who do this too, right? Hobbyist artists who do this too. But the problem is, you can't tell from a tax return alone who the faker is, who the abusive loss is, and who the real business is, who's just not broken even yet, or who had a terrible year. I mean, what performing artists didn't have a loss year during COVID when all their shows were canceled? Like, that's not because you're a hobby. You didn't suddenly become a hobby. COVID happened. So it can happen without your control. But the problem is that the IRS, from the numbers, the tax return is just the Cliff Notes. It's not War and Peace. And so they can only, from reading the Cliff Notes of the tax return, those two tax returns, the fake one and the real one, they look the same. And so the only tool the IRS really has to tell the difference is to audit one or both of those people and examine whether or not they have a profit motive. So artists, big tip here, capture your profit motive. Like, anything that shows your profit motive is something you should keep in your records. And that is any advertising, your website, grant applications, correspondence with people who are in a position to show your work, and basically anything you do that isn't fun. Because I literally mean that. If you hate doing it, it's proof you're a business. Literally, because hobbyists don't do the not fun stuff. Like, if you're doing the bookkeeping, if you're collecting a list on MailChimp and sending emails, you're a business. So, but the hobby loss rule, just to get back to this thread, is that it's like a little sort of rule of thumb that the IRS has to determine, without having to talk to you, because that costs money. So by just looking at data they already have, to make a judgment about if you're a hobby or a business. So the hobby loss rule says, if you have had a profit in 3 out of the last consecutive 5 tax years, the presumption, note, presumption, not definitive, absolute.
Oh.
The presumption is that you're running a business, right? So then what it means, does that mean you can't be audited? Absolutely not. If you have a pulse in a tax return, you can be audited. But what it means, if they do, burden of proof is on the IRS. They have to prove you don't have a profit motive. Now, you can go the other way. And here's where the other accountants are wrong. Here's where your accountant is wrong. What happens if you don't have a profit in 3 out of the last 5 years, so you have more losses than that, it simply shifts the burden of proof. That is all. That is all it does. So same as any tax year, you can still be audited, because you always can. That's our only check and balance in this system. So that is fair. But then the burden of proof is on you. So now you have to prove, the presumption is you're running a hobby, and you now have to prove with documents that you're running a business.
If you get audited.
If you get audited, and only if, yes.
Okay.
And
Thank
it's
you.
important. It's really important to know there is case law, and I'll cite it for you right here so you can have a record of it. Churchman versus Commissioner and Kreil versus Commissioner, 2 artists, both of whom had like 18 years of losses and successfully proved that they were businesses. Tell that to your accountant when they say you're a hobby.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Say, take a look at Kreil versus Commissioner.
How do you spell Kreil, with a C?
Crile. And if you go to my blog, I did a 3-hour interview with Susan Kreil, and I wrote an article about her case, because it's really interesting, and her suffering gave us more ammunition in our pocket, more fuel. So she did a real service to other artists by going through the ordeal that she went through.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think that possibly like me, when you hear that rule about hobby loss rule, that you start to think, well, if I don't produce a profit in 3 years, after 3 consecutive years, I have to shut my business down and I can't be in business and I'm not a real artist.
That's a tragedy. That's not true. And I want you to know it's not true. Yeah.
Yeah, because you may be making your art on the side and it's maybe you're making money, but some of the money you're making is from a side gig, So in other words, even if you're not, it's not a measure of your worth as an artist.
Absolutely not. Oh my goodness, no.
So,
and also, I mean, if you get audited, like it can feel like a punch in the gut. It can really feel like the IRS is saying, like, you're not real, you're not a good artist. And trust me, they could care less. Like, they're not in it for the art. They care about the money. Like, literally the only thing they care about is like the dollar signs on the file. Like,
yes.
They're not saying like you're a good painter.
Well, and I think this ties in with a lot of people's fear about dealing with their finances, personal finance in general, especially I think artists, because again, now I'm stereotyping, but as far as being someone that is more maybe empathic, or not that other people aren't, but a lot of artists are. And so the feeling kind of personality where we are making that tie between our value and the numbers, and getting better at my finances had a lot to do, especially as an empath, with making that line and saying, it's just numbers, it's not personal. Instead of, if you're worried about being able to pay the bills, because underneath you're worried about what it means about you and your worth, a person may not look at their bank account when they absolutely need to go check if a check cleared or a payment was made. And I find that there's an avoidance there with artists sometimes, and anyone, that they're afraid to look. And it's because of this underlying emotional association with their value. So making it not personal is a good thing when it comes to money. And it's numbers. It has nothing to do with your value.
Absolutely. And if I may expand on that,
please.
I think, and this is why I felt so humiliated when I sat with my dad's accountant, many, many, many years ago, and crystallized my thought of like, how can this not be better than this? So I don't know any artist who goes into art because they want to become a millionaire. I mean, that's pretty rare that the primary motivator for an artist is money, which doesn't mean you don't need to eat food or sleep in a bed or wear clothing, right? So like, let's not bring that too far. It's not your primary motivator. That's fine. It doesn't mean money is evil, right? It's just neutral. Make sure money stays neutral to you and not goes over into being a negative thing. That's really important as just a mental frame. Money is a hammer, right? Like, you can build a house with a hammer, but you can also you can destroy a house with a hammer, right? Money is the tool that empowers the person using it, which is the whole reason that everything I do, my whole mission is about helping artists have more money. It's not like, I obviously don't believe money is evil. I think artists are doing such wonderful work in the world and doing the work that will change the world, that I know they will do more of that work and have more longevity with it if they have money. So like, you have to be careful not to start attributing evil to money. You have to just keep it neutral. So that's fine. It's just a tool, like a paintbrush. But I think it's also really important to note that when you are making decisions, so back to the idea that it's not probably your primary motivator, but it can be a factor among several, right? And it should, right? Because you should be paid for your work, I'm here to say. And I think it's really important to note that if it's not your primary motivator, then that will probably get reflected in your numbers. And again, this is a neutral, not a negative, right? This is a neutral thing. So if you're always going to make a decision to go for the more expensive materials so that your paintings look incredible, then that's probably going to show up on your profit and loss statement as expenses that are a little higher than they would be if you were just trying to make maximum profit from selling that thing. And it is 100% fine that you make that choice. In fact, I don't know a single artist who wouldn't make that choice. But then when you look at those numbers, they're going to show that a little bit, right? They're going to show that you made a decision to spend more. And not to totally make money the one and only thing, right? If money was the one and only thing, that balance sheet, that profit and loss statement, it would look probably a little better, right?
Yep.
But I think it can be humiliating and embarrassing for an artist to then look just at the numbers where it's not also showing like your amazing work with all that gorgeous paint in it. When you look at just the numbers, it's only going to show that one thing. And then suddenly you feel judged, right? You feel like, oh, this is showing me how money is not motivating me even at all. This is reflecting back to me all those choices compounded over the last year. And, if you look at an accountant who looks at that and they say nasty things to you, like that one did to me about, and they make it mean something, it can feel awful. Right. But I just want to say that, like, the numbers are going to show stuff. Numbers are kind of objective in that way, and it can be painful to look at them, but they're not showing how awesome that show was you made,
Be still my heart. Thank you. If I do nothing else with this podcast, it really is my mission to use it to try and put back some of the energy drain and self-confidence drain that artists have felt through the years dealing with people like that, who just want to stomp them because they're bullies or they don't get it. And the artist is left feeling diminished. So thank you for doing that, for putting that back in there. That's what we need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now what about looking at it as looking at taxes? What about estimated? Because, my accountant started talking about estimated this year. And I thought, where's the threshold for that? Is there a point at which you have to start making estimated taxes? And when is that?
Sure. So the good news is there's a really clear moment. If your tax bill last year was over $1,000, so let's just remind ourselves what that means. I don't mean your whole taxes for all of last year were over $1,000. I mean your tax bill. So your bill is like the amount you hadn't prepaid during the year. That means you had to reconcile an amount of unpaid taxes that was greater than $1,000. That's what it means to have a tax bill, right? Because if you have a day job, for example, and you have money being withheld through a paycheck, say you're a teaching artist at a university and you have a paycheck, you're prepaying some of your taxes through that, right? And the IRS doesn't care. You might have several hoses pointed towards the US Treasury paying taxes. One might be you making a manual estimated payment. One might be your W-2. One might be your spouse's W-2. Because if you're married filing jointly, you are one single tax unit, not two. So if last year's tax bill was $1,000, and yes, that does include your spouse if you're married filing joint. So this gets muddy because we're layering all the things in your whole scenario together on top of each other. If the tax bill goes over 1,000, now you do have to pay estimated quarterly taxes. And there's a reason for that. The reason, basically, the function of estimated quarterly taxes are to prepay your tax for the current year. They are to pay your taxes as you go instead of getting hit with that enormous, unthinkable full annual tax bill, which is possible to get hit with if you're self-employed, because nobody takes taxes out for you when you're self-employed. So that's the role and purpose of estimated quarterly taxes. They are to pay as you go throughout the year in quarterly chunks, to break up your taxes into 4 payments instead of 1, so that you don't get hit with that, $10,000 unexpected tax bill at the end of the year. That's the painful thing that estimated taxes are trying to keep you out of.
So if you don't do them, you get a penalty?
You do, in fact, yes. So you get up to 4 penalties and daily interest. So on each of the 4, there's 4 quarterly tax deadlines. Google is right here for you. Google will tell you when they are, but they're April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and January 15th. If you owe taxes quarterly, then when one of those dates passes by and no payment has come in from you, that means you'll get a penalty. So if you miss the first one, but then catch up on the next 3, you'll only have 1 penalty and not 4. If you miss all 4, you'll have 4 penalties, right? So the incentive is like,
Keep
better
up.
to figure it out and keep up than to just be like, oh, I messed up, so I'll just completely stay messed up and not fix it. It's like, no, go ahead and fix it. And then daily interest is accrued on your unpaid balance. So daily interest on $1,000 for 365 days is not going to be a ton of money. Daily interest on $20,000 is going to be a lot of money. And the whole incentive with daily interest is better to make your payment today than tomorrow. Literally, it will cost you less today. It'll save you one more day of interest than to pay tomorrow. So you discover in the middle of 2 tax deadlines, oh, shoot, I should have made a payment. Don't wait till the next deadline. Pay now, pay today. That's the incentive.
So it sounds like it's not that complicated as far as making the payment. You just can probably fill out a form, print it out if you want to do it, even, on paper, and just mail in a check if you're not going to do it electronically.
You can absolutely do that. And if you owe quarterly taxes, typically what's going to happen is your tax return will print vouchers right on the front. And so if you see vouchers on the front of your tax return, that is about as close to an engraved invitation as you're ever going to get from the IRS. That is saying you owe these and go ahead and pay them. And it actually has the amounts pre-printed and the dates. So that's pretty good. So print those out, mail the check, that's fine. If you prefer, you can go to IRS Direct Pay and pay online, and that's completely fine. It's pretty easy, really.
So if you received a refund on a particular year, you got a tax refund, then it's safe to say that you don't the next year have to pay estimateds. Am I correct then?
You're not legally required to. Yes.
Okay. Because that's where there have been times where I've gotten a refund and my accountant's like, oh, if you want to pay an estimated next year, but he's been vague about when and why and how much I would need to pay. So I think he's just trying to be helpful, but it doesn't give me an idea of, well, do I need to do this? Should I be doing this? Is it going to put me on some kind of list of being flagged now that I'm volunteering to start this process?
Yeah, it is scary and it is complicated. And I have never found an accountant who explains it very well because it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of moving parts to it. But the idea is that estimated quarterly taxes exist so that you can prepay taxes when you are incurring income that doesn't have any withholding. So it's not just self-employed people who can get in this boat. Like we self-employed people and artists, you are self-employed, like we count as this. It's not just us who make income that's not taxed. So when I sell a painting, nobody took taxes out of that. That counts as like money I should be making estimated payments on. But other people can be in this boat. Farmers are in this boat. Farmers have to make estimated payments. Fishermen have to make estimated payments. Property owners, like landlords, right? The rent checks that you get as income, those don't have taxes withheld. So this system exists for a whole bunch of different kinds of taxpayers, including you. And the whole thing is that you are the one who knows what's happening this year. Your accountant isn't going to know until tax time. So you can let your accountant tell you after the whole year has gone by, oh, hey, you owe $20,000. Or you could get on top of it and prepay some of that $20,000 so that when you talk to your accountant, they're like, you only owe $900. That's so much nicer. That's a better position to be in.
It is. It is. Thank you. And that's really important to be getting all of this decoded information. One of the reasons I'm using this accountant, he's across state lines actually, but he handles this state as well. So we do everything electronically, is he is comfortable working with sales that are online. So my course is virtual. Is that something that needs to be approached entirely differently? How do you find an accountant that's comfortable handling something like that, where you're looking at sales of an online product that's not necessarily a physical product?
Yeah.
Because that put me off for a long time.
Yeah. And I understand. And it's very complicated and scary. So what you're talking about now, we're moving away from income tax and now we're talking about sales tax.
Okay. Different subject.
Something very important to know is that sales tax is a completely different system. I know everybody is like, oh no.
Sorry, listeners, everything's still okay.
So I can confidently sit here and talk about federal income tax because all of you, if you're a US taxpayer, are in the same boat. And then state income tax law generally flows from the federal. So state rules, even though they'll vary, and the Georgia flavor is going to be quite different from the Massachusetts flavor, they'll still generally follow federal rules with some small exceptions. So that's income tax. Sales tax, totally different. Sales tax is a state and local based tax, and there are 9,998 different sales tax jurisdictions in the United States.
Wow.
Just shy of 10,000. So I can't be on a podcast and say one word about sales tax that will apply to all of you. You will all have something different, and you really have to check with someone local. So that's really important. Online sales are a beast because the laws have not caught up with
I noticed
the way
that
we actually do commerce these days. And they act as though, we're all still like operating in 1930, like where all your
brick and
shops
mortar
you shop at are in your neighborhood. And so like, it would be rare that you'd cross county lines. And like, now you're like buying stuff all across the country and the world all the time. So sales and local tax gets complicated.
Thank you, though. I'm wondering if there's a place that people can look to at least find an accountant. Is there some database I picked mine out because he said he would basically address it. He was not afraid. A lot of them were like, yeah, I don't really know about that. He was willing to go into those waters. So is there a place people should look to know they're getting someone that is not going to send them in the wrong direction?
Yeah, that's great. First of all, hang on to your accountant because that's a good one. That's rare. A lot of accountants will be really happy to deal with your income tax and not touch sales tax. So that's
he's brave.
Be careful. Yeah, give him give him some flowers. I do have a resource for people that is just a good place to start. This isn't going to find you an accountant, but it is a good place to at least start getting your head around what sales tax you might actually owe. There is a company called TaxJar. Now, TaxJar is a software. They sell software that helps you handle sales tax and sales tax return filings. You may find, by all means, look up their software. And if it works for you, use it. It's great. As the last time I priced out all the different sales tax softwares, it was the least expensive and it's a good product. But even if you never buy their product, they have a blog, the TaxJar blog, and it's excellent. So I highly recommend going to that website because you can do a state-by-state lookup and you can start parsing out what the nexus rules might be in your state, because nexus rules vary across every state. One state has internet nexus, the next state does not. So I can't tell you what the rules are because literally every one of you listening is going to be in a different place with a different rule. So
thank you.
Yeah, the TaxJar blog, it's really good. And I trust them because they base their whole company around accurate sales tax information. So I go there to just check up on the rules.
That's great. And I'll link to that in the show notes, as well as to you and all of your information.
I should have mentioned this on the podcast, but I have a free visual guide to artist tax deductions. It is like, I spent so much time with a designer making it like graphically understandable. It's colored like in rainbow colors. It's beautiful. But if you want to put that in your show notes and people can download that, it's 1-page printable and they can stick it up by their desk and like do their bookkeeping with it.
I would be grateful. Yeah, I would be happy to put that in there. I'll be sure to do it.
Awesome.
And thank you for that. And would love for you to wrap us up. I appreciate so much your time today. It's an absolute honor to get to speak with you. You give so much to the art community through your services and the world with your art.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you could wrap us up with your best advice for our artists out there who would like to start making money with their art.
I think one, acknowledging the toxicity of that artist stereotype and making sure you get it out of there, realizing that you are always going to be your own best representative. And I'm not saying don't work with galleries, no, but just you are still always going to be the best representative for your work, and that you're giving meta messages about your work all the time. So be more aware maybe of what those are. So treating yourself like you're a real professional is helpful, not just getting a gallery, not just working with other people and making them feel more confident in the quality of your work, but it's actually really helpful on your taxes. So remember that having a profit motive is the thing that entitles you to be able to take expenses, because hobbyists don't get expenses. So be a professional, recognize that a profit motive is, in fact, your safety net when it comes to your taxes. So it's okay to just be cool with it. And I just think as a service, like all artists should really try not to work for free and make their prices too low, because it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts all of us. And I think better treatment in general for artists is important, so we don't get these hobby loss audits. Like, it's a macro problem that we can chip away at the individual level. So all of us treating ourselves with more personal, professional respect, like you, the genuine small business that you are, that's helpful to you, and it's helpful to all of us.